I need some traction. You need some traction.
How's it going, guys? Good, awesome, excited crowd. All right, so before I dive into everything that we're going to be talking about today, a little bit of background. So, as mentioned, I'm VP Marketing at Uberflip, and wanted to give you an idea of what our last 27 months were like. A little bit chaotic, to say the least. We went from being a SMB-focused, self-serve type company where people would just sign up online and upgrade to being very high touch. That means building out marketing and sales. I went from having full funnel visibility with all those great analytics tools we have to all of a sudden half my funnel is in Salesforce. Shit. And Salesforce was a fucking mess at the time. I think a lot of people here can probably relate. We went from 19 employees to 75 employees, a lot of those salespeople. We went from having channel problems to major process problems, which is, I think, really common when it comes to B2B SaaS, especially if you're targeting a higher end customer. And the biggest thing that we found also is we went from having massive customer churn, but at the same time, negative revenue churn, which, if you are in tune with your numbers, you know that's kind of a good thing, right? We were sort of shedding those SMB customers that really weren't aligned with where we were going, and we were making more money. So what is the key thing that's going to help drive this stuff? And what I want to talk about today, we had a lot of really great presentations around product and how to scale product and how to build a product that people really want. But the reality is you need more than product to scale, particularly when we're talking about B2B SaaS. You need a really effective system for improving your processes and your operations, because a good operational process can actually be a competitive advantage. It can mean you move faster and more efficiently than your competitors. So what does this come down to? People, process, tools. Hopefully everybody has heard this or some version of this before. It's kind of old school consultant speak, but it's true. People, process, tools. These are the things you have to think about. And you have to think about them in this order, right? So who are the people? Do you have the right people to execute? Are you implementing the right processes at the right stage of your business? And do you have the right tools in place? So we're going to go really quickly today. We're going to go fast. I have a lot of information for you, and I want you, regardless of what stage you're at, to be able to walk away with some really actionable stuff. But before we do that, I want to set some context. So the way I look at startups is I really look at them in 3 phases of evolution. And this was true for Uberflip, but this is also true for a lot of startups that I worked with that are in the B2B SaaS space. And the first phase I call the Wizard of Oz phase. So this is the phase where you're following the yellow brick road and things are happening, but don't look behind the curtain because it's a fucking shit show. There's no process. How many people can relate to that? Like, honestly, put your hands up. Okay, good. There's no process. Nobody really knows what they're doing. Even though there's stuff happening, like, you're not entirely sure how it's happening. And this is something that's really common among startups, right? Next phase. I like to call it the Scooby-Doo phase. So maybe now you've even grown your team a little bit. Maybe you sort of have figured things out. At the end of the day, you usually solve the mystery, you solve the problem. But for the most part, you're still a bunch of bumbling idiots, right? You're trying to figure things out. I have definitely been in this phase more than once. And this is also the phase where you start to really think about those processes and those tools. And then, of course, the last phase is where you have a team of highly specialized people. They're very coordinated. They know what they're doing. They're using the right processes, the right tools. This is obviously the Ocean's 11 phase. Right, guys? Because I couldn't think of any other movie that would really work well here. So when you think of each of those phases, I want you to keep in mind as I'm talking through this, where are you? Now, the thing that you also want to keep in mind is different parts of your business can be at different phases, right? So, you might have a marketing and sales engine, which is sort of in the Scooby-Doo phase, and then you might have all of the other stuff under Wizard of Oz. And that's normal, and that's okay. But what we're actually going to focus on today is really that marketing sales engine, more from a marketing perspective, because you just had a great talk on the sales side, right? Now, when we look at that revenue engine for B2B SaaS, we all know this, right? There's really 3 core parts to it. There's marketing, there's sales, there's customer success. But how do you think of those things at each stage of your maturity? So, Wizard of Oz stage, sales, sales, sales. You got to sell stuff. You got to figure out if people want it. You got to figure out if people are going to pay for it. Marketing and sales are essentially on that same spectrum. And the smaller or earlier you are, the closer those 2 things are. Does that make sense? closer they are. The earlier you are, the closer marketing and sales are. Everything you're doing is around getting revenue, figuring out, hopefully you've already figured out product market fit. I'm gonna make that assumption, right? And as you start to scale, marketing and sales start to move across the spectrum, right? You go from sales to thinking, okay, we've kind of figured out how to sell stuff. How do we scale that a little bit? How do we start to think about demand marketing, right? How do we generate demand? And it's more than just lead gen. We'll talk about what demand actually is. And then once you start to get really big, then you need to think about, oh, brand. What does that actually mean? It's not as fluffy as people might think, right? So marketing and sales, along the same spectrum, but really the heart of your revenue engine is gonna end up being your customer success, because customer success can drive growth in a way that marketing and sales alone can't. It's about your customers' success. It's about their happiness with your product. So early stage success tends to be really reactive, right? We just answer support calls, support emails. Usually it's like the founder doing it, right? In their basement maybe. But then we start to evolve a little bit. Then we actually start to make a distinction between what's reactive, what's support, versus what's success. And then maybe we get even a little bit more sophisticated around it, and we have support success, and maybe somebody focused on advocacy. And marketing, by the way, also threads through all of these as well, as a support function for all of these things. Now, if you focus on success, guys, there's gonna be 4 key things that you're gonna be able to do. We're gonna dig mostly into the marketing sales stuff, but I want you to keep this in mind because this is gonna be the next phase for you. If you have a really rocking customer success engine, you're gonna be able to control churn, boost revenue through expansion and upsell, create advocates. And listen, we're all going towards an era where your customers are gonna need to be selling for you because there's so much crap and so much noise around there. And your success team also feeds marketing, right? They give you great feedback if you've got that feedback loop going. But how do you actually scale a company and all of the other stuff that goes? You need to understand the operational mechanisms at play. So we're gonna focus on a few different principles that what I find is really lacking in a lot of startups at different stages. And the first one I want to focus on is building a specific buyer persona. How many people here actually have a documented and specific persona that they're targeting? Okay, so maybe a third of the room-ish, maybe a little bit more. So you need to figure out who your bread and butter is. And what ends up happening most of the time is if you're in the Wizard of Oz phase, everybody's a potential customer, yay! No, they're not, I promise. If you're in the Scooby-Doo phase, you're maybe starting to get a little bit more focused, right? And if you really have seen success with a specific segment, and you've got traction, and you've got the resources to build out a team for another segment, maybe it makes sense to explore that. But most of the time, you need to focus on a specific segment in order to scale your business. Now, I'm gonna take you through sort of a story of what we did when we shifted from sort of that self-serve, no-touch funnel to that marketing sales engine. We saw a lot of changes, right? So when we were focused on the SMBs, we were really focused on Nikki. That was our buyer persona. Just like small business, marketing person, kind of did everything, jack of all trades. Then we shifted and we started focusing on Mary, Jen, and David. Now you're like, hold on a second. It's 3 people. What are you doing, Hannah? Mary, Jen, and David are part of a much bigger organization. Mary, Jen, and David are all part of the purchase decision now that we've shifted to enterprise. So it does get more complex as you go up market, but the reality is you can't optimize for both of those things, especially in the early stages. You can't say, I'm gonna optimize my funnel for SMB and I'm gonna build out a sales team that's gonna sell to enterprise, yay. No, you can't do that. The problem with most startups isn't the lack of ideas. The problem with most startups is the lack of clarity and focus. Clarity as to what your goals are, and focus as to what the highest impact things you can do to get there, right? So we shifted to the marketing and sales funnel. We said, screw it, all free trials are gone. You can't upgrade on the site anymore. You have to talk to a salesperson. And this is what ended up happening. We got way more focused in terms of our marketing, in terms of our channels, in terms of what it was we were optimizing for. Our entire marketing team was now focused on filling the top of that funnel. We had better processes between marketing and sales, higher value customers, right? Higher average revenue per customer, higher LTV. Shocker, we raised prices, that's how math works, right guys? And we had negative churn, as I mentioned before. So what did we have to do in order to get there? Well, when we decided to shift up market, we had to do a couple of things. So number one, we had to revamp our analytics setup. As I mentioned before, I went from full visibility of my funnel to, oh shit, Salesforce. Now, that took months of cleaning up Salesforce. But now, we have really great visibility into our funnel. Now, we're using tools on top of Salesforce, like Insights Squared, which was mentioned in the last presentation. We had to shift our growth tactics. We had to shift from using more direct channels, because as we go up, that wasn't working for us, to being almost exclusively content-driven. And we had to redefine the processes and criteria for handing off leads to sales. Now, that you might make a different decision. This might not be the right decision for you. You might focus on SMB, but one thing to keep in mind is that it's really hard to build a big business with a whole bunch of small deals. This quote I grabbed from an article that was actually doing a roundup of Jason Lemkin's new book, From Impossible to Inevitable, as I forget it. Great book, great read, but try and make sure that you're focusing on the type of business that you want to be building. Now, how do you know which persona to target, right? So first of all, do you have product market fit, right? That could give you some indication, but it's not always that clear, is it? Because maybe you have a whole bunch of people using your product because you've been testing a whole bunch of things, but maybe you got segment A on board because you've mostly been focusing on segment A. It's not always super clear, but product market fit. Unit economics. Do they make sense at that particular segment? When we were targeting SMB, they didn't look so good. When we were targeting enterprise, they looked fantastic. Really easy to make a decision there. Is there a huge opportunity for that segment, for that persona, for growth? And what do you want to do? Do you want to sell to enterprise? It's not always fun. I know, I do it, right? So you have to start to think of all of these things as you're picking your target, as you're moving it forward. Now, I'm just gonna flip through these slides pretty quickly, guys, but I wanted to give you an idea of sort of what our personas look like. You're gonna get all of these, so feel free to follow the same format, feel free to ask them the same questions. This is the output that went to the sales team, right? These are the top personas that really you're gonna meet when you're trying to buy Uberflip. You're gonna meet the content marketer, Marketing Mary, you're gonna meet Demand Gen, you're gonna meet Do It All Dave, and you're gonna meet their boss, Strategic Samantha. You gotta get into that level of specificity for your sales team. We went through, we created a whole bunch of questions to ask these people, and we came out with this output. How do they purchase things? Where do they read content? What kind of customers are they? And also, what is the key messaging that you wanna give to these people? What are their goals, right? So take these, adapt them, and use them for your company. Now, last thing I'm gonna say on this is that if you still try to go broad, you're gonna run into the same problems that a lot of companies have run into. Brian Halligan, by not deciding on one of these personas, we paid a gigantic invisible optionality tax. This was from a great article that he wrote called From Startup to Scale Up. HubSpot got stuck because they were focused on too many personas. As soon as they oriented the entire company around one persona, one type of segment, one company, they were able to scale. So, it's not just the people, it's the process. You focus on the persona, but you also have to focus on what their internal processes are. They touched on this in the last presentation as well. This is what I see most SaaS companies do. They reach out with their sales team, they have that initial touch, then they get all the influencers and decision makers on board. They get approval, budget approval, yay. They get a verbal yes, yay. They hit procurement, shit. It's not good, right? Because you can get stuck in procurement for a couple months, and if you've never done it before, you don't know what to expect. You have to understand the process. We had something get hung up in procurement because of the way our invoice was formatted. Not even joking. 2-month hang up, right? Understand the process. Number 2, your funnel isn't linear. So early stage, this is usually what I see. We're getting leads and we're getting customers, yay, that's our funnel. That's the conversion that's happening if you've got a sales team. You get a little bit more sophisticated. Okay, we're getting all of these leads. Now maybe we have a way to qualify these leads. And then they're customers. Awesome. And now you're getting even more sophisticated. So most funnels are gonna look something like this. You get leads, you get MQLs, you get sales accepted leads, maybe sales qualified leads, opportunities, customers. And from there, you pull it out and you've got a whole funnel there for the actual sales process. We talked about this in the last session. Now, this is just an example, sort of a generic one. It could look a little bit different than this, but this is the type of stuff that you have to start thinking about operationalizing. Every single person marketing, sales, success, every single person in the company needs to understand what your funnel looks like. If they don't, you're gonna lose out, you're gonna sacrifice customers, you're gonna sacrifice revenue, you're gonna sacrifice speed of execution. So, what you have to remember for your funnel, a linear funnel is overly simplistic, and this is not just B2B SaaS, this is everything. We all think in funnels, and it helps us visualize things, it helps us optimize things, but it's not that easy. So people might move up and down your funnel. And sales and marketing functions also overlap at every stage of the funnel, right? Marketing doesn't stop up here with lead gen, marketing goes all the way through. You have to remember that. So what do you need to think about when you're actually looking at this bi-directional funnel, the feedback mechanisms to enhance quality? Sales has to tell marketing when quality is shit, right? You need to have coordinated campaigns at every level. Otherwise, someone's gonna get an email 6 times. Who's done that? We've done that. It's not good, right? You need a process for re-engaging lost leads. And you need to remember that the way you do your funnel, so this is how we speak about it internally. This is our operational funnel. But the way your customer thinks about it is more like this. Oh, now I know about you guys, great. Maybe I'm sort of interested. Oh, maybe I'll evaluate the product. Maybe I'll buy the product. Hey, I'm gonna become an advocate, right? And for the first little while, marketing was only at that top of the funnel. It was all sales. Once you get more progressive, marketing goes a little bit deeper. Once you get even more progressive, it's all throughout the funnel. And really what you're aiming for is having marketing and sales being coordinated across the board. And this is just a depiction of why you need that, because there's stuff happening across all teams functionally across the board. So how do you take all of that information that I just went through and how do you actually build your engine? So we talked about the 3 pillars, right? Your marketing, your success, and your sales teams. If you were a really, really keen observer, you will notice that the arrows are a little bit different here, right? We kind of had it going around in a cycle, but now we've got it going both ways because you need that feedback loop between all 3 teams. And now we need to start to think about having sort of that marketing consistency all the way through. We need to have sales really focused on sales, and you need to have success really focused on not just success of a customer, but building engaged advocates. And what that's gonna end up doing, guys, is it's gonna help you build better product because you're gonna have a better feedback loop going. It's gonna help you build better process, right? But it's also gonna change how you're actually starting to hire people and also how you're starting to report on these metrics, right? So, this is what our marketing and sales engine looks like. I'm gonna give you guys this. You can actually go through and you can take a look at all of the different campaigns and programs we run, all of the different lead management stuff that we run, the sales enablement stuff. You're gonna get these slides, so use this framework if it makes sense for you. But what I wanna talk about today is really around that demand generation piece. I've had 3 startups reach out to me in the last, I think, 3 weeks around needing a demand gen person. But at the same time, one of them asked me, what the fuck is demand gen, right? So demand gen is one of those misunderstood things. Demand gen is really common in B2B SaaS. Demand gen is marketing, guys, right? So it generates leads, it identifies and nurtures qualified prospects, optimizes conversion. What does that sound like? It sounds like marketing, right? So these are the different core operational things that happen from a demand gen perspective. And what I mean by operational, I mean the actual nuts and bolts of how you guys are executing things, right? So obviously messaging design, asset creation, content marketing, optimization, we all know marketing does that. Campaign management, we all know marketing does that at the top of the funnel. But how do you actually capture leads? How do you track the source of those leads? How do you track it through that entire funnel? How do you score leads? How do you nurture? Data enrichment, lead management processes, those are all operational things that need to be optimized at that level. Now, depending which stage you're at, the complexity of that is gonna change, right? Depending on which stage, the complexity is gonna change. Now, what are some strategies and tactics you can actually use for demand gen? The way we think about it really is in 6 sort of major buckets, but it's gonna change depending on what it is that you need and what it is that your business does and your model. So obviously lead generation for us is content syndication and partner marketing. That's huge for us, right? Webinars, highest converting lead source, all the way through to customer when we're looking at first touch attribution, which is crazy to me because I feel like there's so many webinars out there. Online advertising, PPC, social retargeting, publishers, working with publishers to syndicate your content. Conferences, there's an event renaissance happening. We're all at a conference, right guys? Conferences can have a super high ROI, but they have to be very targeted, very niche. Partner marketing, and obviously organic. And what really fuels demand gen is really around content marketing and direct channels, and event marketing to a degree if you are doing that. One other thing I want to bring up, how many people here know what account-based marketing is? Oh, okay, cool. So account-based marketing makes sense if you're targeting that bigger customer, right? Account-based marketing is really around not the individual leads, but here are the top 50 companies that I want as customers. And then you go after those and you target with those. It actually starts with an account-based selling process. It requires marketing and sales work really close together. So how do you structure your marketing team? Early stages, it's mostly generalists. Start to focus the roles as you go up. So for us, here's our core marketing functions. For us, content marketing, demand gen, events and communications, product marketing. We have a few people on content, 4 people on demand gen actually. A couple people on events, a couple people on marketing. But what are the other functions that you want to start to think of as you scale? Well, you want to start to think of a brand marketer. You want to start to think of maybe public relations if it makes sense, although that's a hugely or misunderstood segment, right? Field marketing. If you're splitting by territories and you want to make sure you have people on the ground. Sales enablement. New role that's starting to come up lately is a head of sales enablement, sort of sits between marketing and sales. And advocate marketing. How many people here have heard the term advocate marketing before? Oh, Mark is not going to be happy to hear that tomorrow. So Mark Oregon speaking tomorrow. Everybody put your hand up when he asks you if you've heard of advocate marketing. So these are the things you have to start to think of when you're thinking of building out your demand gen team. Now, the 3 most important things about actually sort of demand gen and what the function is going to do is really around qualifying leads, right? It's really around driving revenue. So there are 3 things, again, I want you to think about: quality, indicators, and intent. So how do you actually identify quality, but also how do you find those indicators that are going to say, hey, this is a good time to reach out? So quality is a little bit easy now. Fit, engagement, intent is a little bit harder. How do we actually do intent? Well, lead scoring is a first start. Predictive analytics, we talked about this in the last session. If you've got the money to do it, a predictive analytics tool can be hugely beneficial, but you need to understand the pre-purchase indicators. So this is the big convoluted system that we use to score our leads. I'll share this with you guys. You guys can take these. You're going to get all the slides. But you'll see there's different points assigned to different people, and there's some leads that are fast-tracked through straight to the sales team. Outreach indicators. This is what we're working on now. So how do we know before somebody knows themselves whether or not they actually want to buy? So we know that if somebody's going through a site redesign and they're in our demographic, hey, this is a good indicator that they might be ready for Uberflip. If we know they're coming up on their fiscal year end, they want to spend budget, might be a good time to reach out. If we know they're ramping up their content strategy, if we know they've invested in specific tools that overlap with us, right? If we know that there's key industry growth. So this is all of the industries, all the customers of Uberflip. And we did this analysis a little while ago, and we found out that 50% of our customers are in those first 4 segments. But those first 4 segments, even though they have slightly different names, are basically all tech, right? 50% of our customers are tech. The other 50% of our customers are across a whole broad range of other industries. So when we identify some of those growing industries, then we know who to reach out to, how to focus on from a demand gen perspective. And at the end of the day, guys, it's all about relationships. Terms marketing, kind of a corny one, but really talks about the alignment between marketing and sales. So how do you create an SLA that makes sense for both? You have to define the process. This is our process, right? Don't try and read it, it's too many words. But take it home, look at it, see if you can actually make it work for you. See what you should change in order to make it work for you. And at the end of the day, sales and marketing need to agree on everything. It's really easy as you scale for those teams to get super siloed. Really easy, and it happens overnight and you don't even notice it. Be cognizant of it. Set expectations, set an SLA. So what are some of those major challenges? Really, at the beginning, it's around selling. As you move forward, it's around implementing the right process, and then it's really around executing the right process. Now, have about 1 more minute, and I almost took this part out, but I wanted to touch on it because I think this is something that's widely misunderstood, is what are your unit economics? And again, as we look through those 3 phases, first phase, I'm assuming you have product market fit. Second phase, does the math work, right? And then can you scale the math? So can you make more money than it costs to acquire a customer? Do your unit economics make sense? So you guys all know this. I'm gonna skip this, but you guys hopefully all know this. What's CAC, what's customer lifetime, and what's LTV? Everybody does know this, right? Yeah, okay, good. But here are some common problems that I see in how people are actually looking at these metrics. So are they calculating fully loaded CAC? So many startups are not, and what I mean by fully loaded CAC is taking into account sales salaries, right? A lot of times only marketing spend is taken into account. Is your churn even accurate? If you're early, it's probably not. Same with LTV, right? And when you look at CAC ratio, even though we've got all of these guidelines here, if CAC and LTV are out of whack, then your CAC ratio is also not gonna make sense, right guys? So optimizing for growth and optimizing for efficiency are two very different things. You can optimize for growth and have your growth number go really high, but then you're super inefficient and you have no money in 6 months, right? We've seen that happen over and over again. So one thing that I hear a lot, again, is we have a CAC problem. Awesome, now what? Usually, what most founders do is they're like, shit, we need to find a way to decrease CAC, and that's how they think about it. But I want you guys to think about it two ways. I want you to think about decreasing CAC versus improving CAC efficiency. So we have two fake companies. We have company A, company B, exact same metrics. They actually have a decent CAC ratio, if you're using the benchmark of 4, right? And don't worry so much about, again, the slides, because you're gonna get all of this stuff. But let's say these companies approach it differently. So company A focuses on decreasing CAC. So all they want is to pay less per customer. They don't really care about the other stuff. So they find cheaper channels to get leads through the door. They focus on increasing conversion rate at the top of the funnel. Nothing wrong with that. But the key metric they're focused on is that conversion rate, not through to customer. That happens a lot, right? I'm decreasing my cost per lead, but I don't actually know if these leads are gonna convert because they're cheaper and maybe lower quality. Now, company B, on the other hand, focuses on efficiency. They decide to focus on a better marketing and sales process. They increase sales velocity so people sell deals faster. They evaluate their pricing. They realize, hey, maybe they're not charging quite enough. Most people aren't charging quite enough, right? They shorten payback. They increase customer value. And just by those little tweaks, you see that the CAC ratio actually goes up significantly, right? Now, these are totally made up numbers. I pulled them out of my ass, but they do illustrate the point of approaching CAC very differently. When you have a CAC problem, understand what your actual problem is. It might not be a cost thing. It might be an efficiency thing. If you'll notice, company B actually spent more to acquire a customer than company A. So what are some benchmarks here? I actually threw this chart in because I really like it. We use it as a guideline. This is from David Scock's blog, if you have heard of him. Popular Boston, VC, smart guy, knows a lot about SaaS. I believe if you Google B2B SaaS, he's like the first result. I think he's like the first 4 results. And these are his benchmarks for what CAC is. So start to think about that. And start to think about how your operational efficiencies can actually help. So if you guys can be more efficient, you're gonna be able to spend less money. If deals are being closed in a better, faster, more efficient way, you're gonna spend less money at the top of the funnel. And you're gonna increase sales velocity. So the last section, guys, is, I'm gonna be really brief because we talked a lot about tools last time. I know I said people process tools, but the reality is people process tools is great in theory, but I'm gonna impress upon you that don't jump to the tool right away. And again, have worked with multiple companies where they come to me and they're like, we need a marketing automation platform. We're gonna use Marketo. Okay, great, why do you think you need a marketing automation platform? Well, we wanna be able to automate everything that we're doing. Awesome, let me see everything that you're doing. Not so good, right? And the problem is if you automate bad marketing, it's still bad marketing, right? Shocker. So don't jump to the tool right away, but here's a high-level framework of some of the things you want to be thinking of, right? Early stage, email marketing, basic CRM, analytics, optimization tools. As you start to get a little bit more sophisticated, maybe marketing automation, maybe something to aggregate your campaign management, data enrichment, right? Maybe a little bit of sales automation. And then you might want to start to think about some predictive analytics, multi-touch attribution, an analytics tool that gives you that, maybe some programmatic advertising, maybe some personalization software, right? And I'm not talking about the fake personalization. What I'm talking about is real personalization. And what I mean by fake personalization, I went to a website a few weeks ago, landed on their site. This is what this company does, is they do personalization. And it says, hi, Uberflip. I'm like, huh. So they know my IP, they looked it up, they put hi, Uberflip. But I know I work at Uberflip. I don't need them to tell me that, right? What I do want is really relevant content for the topic that I'm searching for. So think of it that way. Now, for your enjoyment, I also included our stack. So these are all of the different marketing technologies that we use. Yep, there are a lot of them. Some of them are in multiple places because we use them for different things. Take this, look at it, see what makes sense for you. But again, don't jump to the tool too early. People first, then process, then figure out the tool that's going to help enhance all of that. Thanks, guys.
I need some traction. You need some traction.